Uh, Good morning and good afternoon to all. It is my honor to welcome you all to this event today. First, I would like to thank the Honorable Additional Secretary SKG Rahate from the Ministry of Power for giving the keynote speech for today's webinar. I also thank Dr. Asundi, the Executive Director of the Center for Study of Science, Technology and Policy, for being our partner in developing this webinar. I would also like to thank you all the other speakers and high-level stakeholders for attending and sharing their expertise today. And by the way, I would like to remind you that this webinar is recorded. So India and the IEA benefit from a long-standing relationship, which became closer in January of this year, when we signed the Strategic Partnership Framework. This signing came just 4 years after the IEA welcomed India as an association country, and India is the only country with this status. The policy choices made over the next decade will be critical to setting India on a clean energy pathway. The IEA congratulates the government for its ambitious renewable energy targets and stands ready to collaborate and assist India further, notably under the IEA's Clean Energy Transition Program. Now, hydropower. Hydropower plays a critical role in clean energy transitions for several reasons. First, it is the world's largest source of carbon-free electricity, providing almost half of it already today. And it has the potential to contribute even more given its untapped remaining potential, especially in emerging economies and developing countries, including India. Second, and equally important, the hydropower is also the largest source of system flexibility and storage, which are needed to integrate higher share of solar and wind. Hydropower plants can ramp up and down quickly to balance the variability in supply and demand. And pumped storage hydro is the largest and most cost-effective form of electricity storage today. Third, hydropower helps countries to meet multiple policy objectives, such as providing affordable access to electricity, ensuring electricity security, while at the same time providing non-energy water benefits, such as flood control, irrigation, and creating jobs. Despite these benefits, however, there are several barriers for hydropower development. In June 2021, this year, the IEA published the first ever market report dedicated to hydropower, providing a market forecast until 2030, identifying main barriers and proposing policy recommendations to address those issues. Our special hydropower market report shows that without urgent policy actions, net capacity additions over the 2021 to 2030 are forecast to slow down by almost a quarter compared with the previous decade. Three main barriers that I would like to highlight are: one is long duration and uncertainty of environmental permitting can elongate project development timelines and create cost overruns. This is a problem everywhere, including India. Permitting issues and relevant possible solutions, including the sustainability standards, will be discussed in session 1 today. The financing of new projects remain a challenge, particularly in emerging economies and the developing countries, where there's large untapped greenfield potential, but developers and utilities can be financially strained. We have the privilege to have the World Bank, which will provide remarks on this topic in session 1. Developing a business case for pumped storage plants remains very challenging, both in advanced and emerging economies. The IEA praises India's specific policy actions and possible options to support the pumped storage hydro will be discussed in the session 2. So, ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, in the the hydropower market report, we identified 7 key policy recommendations, which also address the above mentioned barriers. The first and foremost is to recognize the multiple benefits of hydropower and move hydropower up the energy and the climate policy agenda. So with that, I would like to welcome the Honorable Additional Secretary of the Ministry of Power, the Honorable the SKG Rahate, to give today's keynote speech and to set the stage for the webinar. So, Mr. Hate, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. A very good afternoon to all. Mr. Kesuk Sadamori, Director, Energy Markets and Security, IEA. Dr. Jay Asundi, Executive Director, Center for Study of Science, Technology and Policy. All the esteemed guests present in this webinar and all other participants. It is indeed a pleasure to be present here amongst such a esteemed group of audience, and I really appreciate IEA and Center for Study of Science, Technology and Policy for organizing this important webinar on a very significant topic, that is India's hydropower sector, and also giving me the opportunity to speak about the overall hydropower scenario in India, its target, and the federal policy environment. This webinar will surely provide us an in-depth knowledge on hydropower's role in energy transition by providing us a comprehensive picture of the global hydropower sector and the various issues and challenges involved in developing hydropower. Just to give a brief overview of the scenario in India, India's installed capacity is 388 gigawatt, out of which renewables account for 38.5% of the total installed capacity. This includes hydro, which constitutes 46 gigawatt. Only if we see the hydro's contribution in the total installed capacity, then it is 12% of the total installed capacity. Out of the total electricity generation in the country, the renewables account for 24%, out of which hydropower's share is 12% of the total generation. It is well known that India is leading the way in fulfilling the commitments under the NDC as given in the COP21 at Paris in 2015. India has already achieved 38.5% of installed renewable capacity against the NDC target of achieving 40% of its cumulative electric power installed capacity from non-fossil based energy sources by 2030. Further, against the NDC target of reducing emission intensity by 33 to 35% in 2030 against the levels of the year 2005, the proactive measures by the government of India have already resulted in reduction in emission intensity by 28% so far. So India is all set to achieve its NDC commitments. Honorable Prime Minister of India has set an ambitious target of installing 175 gigawatt capacity of RE by 2022 and 450 gigawatt RE capacity by 2030 in the country. So far, we have already achieved 100 gigawatt of RE capacity in the country. With such large-scale capacity additions from variable and intermittent sources of power, that is solar and the wind, the focus has now shifted for expeditious development of hydropower plants, including pump storage plants.
I am afraid that the we have lost the additional secretary. So I guess that we will need to move on. Yeah, move on to the next speaker. It's really unfortunate. Sorry about this. Now we have him back. So, secretary,
Sorry,
please go on.
there was connectivity issue. So I'll continue.
Please go. Yes, please.
Yeah. So a study was carried out by Central Electricity Authority for optimal generation mix in the country by 2030, as per which 27 gigawatt for 4 hours, equivalent to 108 gigawatt hour of energy storage, would be required in the country by the year 2030. Further, pump storage plants are globally considered as amongst the best storage plants. Since apart from smooth renewable integration, these are sources for supply of balancing power, grid stabilization, and ancillary sources for improved frequency. As per the reassessment studies carried out by our Central Electricity Authority, the hydroelectric potential of India is about 148 gigawatt. And if we add the potential of pump storage, it is another 96 gigawatt. This potential is all identified by our Central Electricity Authority. Presently, our installed capacity is just 46 gigawatt, which is one third of the potential of large hydro, and there is immense potential of pump storage which is yet to be tapped. Now we have planned to add 30,000 megawatt by 2030, including 8,700 megawatt of pump storage projects. Also, we are in parallel identifying off the river PSPs also, because off the river PSPs have minimum environmental impact and they can be executed at a faster pace. This off the river PSPs do not involve issues like optimal development of the river basin or e-flow or interstate issues, and do not have any complex civil structures like spillways, desilting chambers that are generally associated with conventional stations. So while we have tremendous potential for large hydro as well as pump storage, we in India have now taken various initiatives to tap this potential, expedite our hydropower capacity augmentation, And we have taken several initiatives towards that direction. As we all know, there are certain specific challenges and barriers for characteristic of the hydropower plant development, like land acquisition issues are there, environmental and forest issues are there, lack of adequate infrastructure, roads and bridges is also a hindrance. Then the rehabilitation and resettlement issues, local agitation also is a big challenge for hydropower development. Further, since these hydropower plants are located at remote places and far off locations, the viability of the generated power, the tariff is generally on the higher side. So that acts as a deterrent for signing of power purchase agreement. And this discourages developers for taking hydropower projects since tying a fund becomes difficult. Keeping the entire perspective in mind, Government of India in March 2019 came out with specific measures for promoting hydropower. Like Government of India has declared large hydropower about 25 megawatt as renewable energy sources. So that would make all these projects eligible for getting uh, finances as available for renewable projects. Then we have also come out with hydro purchase obligation as a separate entity within the non-solar renewable purchase obligation. Further, tariff rationalization measures have been put in place for bringing down hydropower tariff. The life of the project has been extended from 35 to 40 years. And also, like we have taken action for ensuring that finances are made available under priority sector for hydropower projects. Then we have also come out with budgetary support for flood moderation as well as budgetary support for cost of enabling infrastructure. As I have mentioned earlier, since the projects are located at far off location, the enabling infrastructure, road, bridges, a lot of investment used to go in that, and that would add to the project cost and increase the tariff. So to rationalize this, we have come out with budgetary support for enabling infrastructure, rupees 1.5 crore per megawatt for projects up to 200 megawatt, and 1 crore per megawatt for projects above 200 megawatt. 1.5 is for projects up to 200 and 1 crore per megawatt for projects above 200. As a result of these measures, the capital cost as well as the project tariff would be reduced in initial years. That would further improve the viability and sellability of the project. In pursuance of the hydropower policy of March 19, we have also issued the hydropower purchase obligation and notified in this in January 21. Further, we have issued guidelines for avoiding time and cost overruns in hydro projects. The main features of the guidelines include cutoff date as defined in CERC tariff regulation to be taken as the sunset date for hydro projects. Further, developers are supposed to prepare realistic project schedule based on past experience and use the latest software for project monitoring. Besides, timely payment has to be released to contractor to avoid any kind of financial crunch. In addition to the initiatives already put in place in March 2019, some new policy initiatives have been taken in the recent months. Now we are carrying out innovation in the contract management by introducing dispute avoidance mechanism through appointment of an independent engineer for each contract package. And also, like normally most of the disputes go to arbitration and it's a time taking process, and that adds to the time overrun of the project and also the cost overrun of the project. So we are now bringing out this mechanism of dispute avoidance through a independent engineer. There will be another level above that, that will be conciliation committee. So this would give a option for trying these alternative methods for dispute resolution, and the arbitration process can be avoided and we can save time. Further, government of India has recently extended waiver of interstate transmission charges on transmission of electricity generated from pump storage projects. This is a important policy intervention that has been carried out just about few months back. Now, further to streamline the process of concurrence, we have like decentralized the process of examining and concurring the detailed project reports of hydro projects. Now, DPR of hydro projects with cost more than 1,000 crores only have to be submitted to CA for concurrence. While for projects which are less than 1,000 crores, the DPR can be concurred at the state level only. Then we have also stipulated specific timelines for examination of DPRs. Time-bound appraisal norms have to be done within a period of 150 working days. Proposal for financial support to hydro developers for transmission infrastructure up to the pooling point of ISTS is also being considered for, by making available budgetary support for this particular infrastructure. Because normally, as I have mentioned, all these hydropower plants are located at far off places. The cost of dedicated infrastructure to the nearest pooling station of interstate transmission is quite capital intensive, and that adds to the project cost. So we are taking the burden of this particular cost of transmission infrastructure up to the pooling point of ISTS. In addition, Ministry of Power has recently constituted a group of officers for formulating a very comprehensive policy framework for energy storage in power sector. And when we talk of energy storage, pump hydro is a essential part of the energy storage. So this comprehensive policy would deal with all aspects, like aspects pertaining to policy and regulatory issues, then finance and incentives, technology, demand management. All these aspects would be considered by the group of officers to come out with a comprehensive policy for promoting energy storage, that is pump hydro. So these are few of the policy initiatives put in place by Ministry of Power. And when we see the way forward, we are also like it has been the experience that the state-owned enterprises are better placed for developing hydropower plants in view of the inherent challenges of land acquisition, then resettlement, and other issues. And keeping that in mind, we are also trying to encourage Ministry of Power CPSU to take up projects which are stalled in these areas where there are huge potential of hydropower, particularly the northeast region of our country. So this is also like we are working out a mechanism how these stalled projects, these are all very good sites. All these sites, like the techno-economic concurrence examination has been done by CEA, but since these projects were allotted to some private sector who have not come forward and they have not done anything to develop the projects, and they are sitting over the projects since last 8 to 10 years. We are now in consultation with the state government, trying to work out a mechanism how this stalled hydro projects can be given to the state-owned central public sector undertakings, and in a time-bound way, we can exploit this hydro potential. For that, we are also planning to have basin-wise development assigned to each central public sector undertakings. Then what I just said, we are planning to incentivize pump storage in a big way, and this will be part of the comprehensive policy for which a group of officers has already been constituted. Also, we would be encouraging the states for deferring or giving a staggered treatment for taking this free power. That would bring down the initial tariff, and in some states this has been very successfully done, like Himachal Pradesh, where they stagger the free power over a period of 10 to 12 years, and that reduces the tariff in the initial years. So on the same line, we are now requesting northeastern state governments also to consider it, so that will make the hydro projects viable, uh, and it will encourage development of the hydro plants in a big way. Further, waiver of transmission charges already we have done for pumps storage. We would see how it can also be in some way for specific locations can be put in place for conventional hydro. So these are some of the action plan which the government of India plans to carry out in the coming years for promoting hydro in a large scale. I think I've taken more than the time allotted to me, but well, I thought I would just like to apprise this forum the initiatives being taken for promoting hydropower and what target we have for the next 8 to 10 years. And the deliberation in the webinar will definitely help in further firming up our plans, and also will help us in ensuring that promotion of hydropower plants is taken to the next level. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Secretary, for the very kind of detailed the explanation presentations of the India's hydropower targets plans, and also the government's the support measures. Very much appreciated. Next, I would like to hand the floor to Dr. Jay Asundi, the Executive Director of the CSTP. So floor is yours, please.
Good afternoon, good morning. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, loud and clear.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. Mr. Kesuke Sadamori, Director, Energy Markets, Shri SKG Rahate, Additional Secretary, Ministry of Power, esteemed participants and friends. Many of you are already experts in the field. I would like to start by thanking IEA for partnering with us at CSTEP on this webinar on hydropower in India. The recent IPCC report highlights the emergency we face on climate change. Mitigation on the power sector, especially the power sector, is the need of the hour. We just heard from Additional Secretary Rahate on the fossil fuel-free energy achievements in India, and the role of hydropower in the same. What was also heartening to hear was the new policy changes that are going to encourage and support pumped hydropower. As many of you may know, India is one of the largest operating synchronous grids in the world. With the country braced for high renewable energy generation in the near future, especially the variable generation from solar and wind, there is a need to balance the grid economically and efficiently. The variability in renewable energy as well as the power demand gives rise to concerns of grid security and stability. Now, this variability can range anywhere from seconds to hours to days and even sometimes months. Now, to overcome this variability, we need flexible generation, spinning reserves, and pumped hydro storage, and other forms of storage like batteries and ancillary services. Now, hydropower just so happens to be one of the most flexible sources of power when it comes to traditional ones, as they can operate at fairly low loads. They can be started very quickly. They have a very good ramp rate and can alter their production to accommodate the system's needs. Now, these flexible capabilities make them very well suited to supply a broad range of system services required for a stable power system, especially operations across various timescales. So in this regard, the webinar is very timely, very apropos, and we hope to discuss the global and India's hydropower development, as well as its potential for systems integration, flexibility, and storage. Now, just like hydroelectric power, pumped hydro can provide frequency regulation and balance the intermittent renewable generation and provide peaking power to the grid. Now, this is due to its superior features, such as continuous generation for a number of hours, depending upon the storage capacity of the reservoir, the high ramping capability, a very fast capacity ramping up per amount of time, its efficiency in the high range of 70 to 80%, and of course, the long lifespan of these investments, almost 40 to 60 years. In addition, they are also cost effective. Even compared to the cost of batteries, which despite their reduction in cost, it's still lower than cost of batteries. Now, despite these features, the growth of pumped hydro has been very tepid in India. I think in this regard, C-STEP has done a study on pricing mechanism of pumped hydro that could help increase its uptake in India, which will be presented by my colleagues during the session 2 of this webinar. So in the study, we developed a differential pricing mechanism for different pumping and generation prices. And the idea is that there's some profits that is to be earned by the entities running these systems for a fixed cost recovery. So we looked at 2 different use cases where we could look at meeting peaking load as well as renewable energy smoothing. And we looked at 2 case studies in Uttarakhand as well as Andhra Pradesh, 2 very different parts of the country. In general, I would just like to say that the key findings are that different peak and off-peak charges are needed. We need to invest in the development of pumped hydro, and it should be done on the basis of the services it provides. And the sizes must be designed based on the requirement of those particular areas or regions. The services that could be in the form of energy arbitrage, peak load shaving, RE smoothing, frequency and voltage support. These are some of the examples that we can look at from a services point. So, with these very few words, I would like to once again welcome you to this webinar and this important topic of hydro energy. And thank you again for spending your valuable time with us. And I look forward to taking some results, some outcomes from this webinar for the future. Thank you again very much.
Thank you, Dr. Asundi, for the very precise presentation on the role of hydro and pumped hydro in Indian power systems. Now, with this, I would like to conclude the opening session, and I would like to move on to the session 1 on hydropower development globally and India. So I would like to
Thank you very much, Mr. Sadamori. Thank you very much to all the participants and keynote speeches. I would like to move forward with the presentation of our hydropower special market report with a focus on India. This is the first of its kind in terms of the what IEA has done as a 10-year forecast for a specific technology. And I would like to go through it with a focus on India. First of all, our director, Mr. Sadamori, mentioned we looked at globally the role of hydropower, and we named it as the forgotten giant of the electricity sector. The reason why is actually very simple. Hydropower remains the largest source of low carbon electricity generation, significantly higher than nuclear and all renewables combined. And this brings an important contribution of 16% in global electricity generation. This is the first forgotten giant. But the second point that is forgotten is the role of the flexibility, which we will be discussing mostly on the session 2. When you look at global flexible power capacity, hydropower contributes equally as gas and coal, because of the previous speeches mentioned its ability to be extremely flexible. And however, both of these terms, as we talk about wind and solar and the flexibility of natural gas all the time, we tend to forget the role of hydropower, which IEA is here to remind to everybody in this publication. It remains the largest backbone of the flexibility in our power systems, including India. When we look at the current trajectory of hydropower globally and how it will move in the next 10 years, we see that hydropower capacity additions have been increasing over the last 3 decades, led by China. However, in the next 10 years, basically the Chinese decline, as a lot of economic sites have been tapped over the last 30 years, is slowing down the growth in China and leads basically to a decline of 23% growth in the coming decade. Also to this decline, Latin America, especially Brazil, contributes with a slowdown of hydropower as the country deployed significant amounts of capacity of large-scale run-of-river plants in the last decade. However, we see also an important trend that in India and the Southeast Asian countries, there is a revival of hydropower. And this revival is visible in this figure. As you know, the growth of in these regions increase actually instead of declining, and partially offsetting decline in China. The role of India remains extremely important in the future. The share of India over the last 30 years in hydropower capacity growth was about 3 to 6%. However, we see this trend basically reaching almost 12% in the coming 10 years. So India will play a much larger role in India in global hydropower capacity growth. In this report, globally, we also looked at for the first time what types of hydropower will be developed and what are the drivers for those. And our results show that the reservoir hydropower plants will be the largest source of growth, as they provide water management and flood control services in addition to the electricity generation, but also it creates a flexible generation for countries who want to have the backup for their variable renewables. The second largest growth is from pump storage, and the drivers are mentioned in the previous speeches. We will go back to it very clearly. Flexibility needs are increasing all around the world, including India. This will drive the growth of the pump storage plants, and mostly smaller projects in the world are run-of-river projects. They have very limited storage capabilities, maximum 24 hours, but they will also represent an important growth in many countries. When we look at the policy support, the main driver of all renewables today, wind and solar, as you know, is the policy support. This doesn't necessarily mean the financial support, but meaning that there's a policy behind it. And globally, when we assess the hydropower policy support, we see that it's extremely limited, especially compared to wind and solar. As you can see, only 20 to 30 countries ranging different policies are implemented. While when you look at solar PV and wind, this number will go above 100. So it remains a niche technology in terms of support for many reasons. But it's one of the big challenges, as I would like to discuss in the session, the limited policy support on hydropower. And we also saw in our analysis an important trend that small hydropower is supported significantly more than the large hydropower. This is particularly, it's more expensive. There are more potential in multiple countries for the small hydropower. And there's a public companies are involved in the development of large hydropower, which leads me to my next slide, which is showing the role of the public sector, which is almost unchanged over the last 3 decades, and it will not change in the future. Actually, it will increase. The role of public sector in terms of hydropower capacity additions, we expect to reach 80%, as the public sector and the government is extremely important in de-risking hydropower projects, reducing long development timelines, and reducing the challenges concerning social acceptance. And because hydropower projects are riskier than solar and PV because of their size, because of their involvement with the communities, and many other reasons. That's why it's important for the public sector to be present. And private sector usually develops for smaller projects where there is key strong policies. So we will come back to that later. India picture is actually not different than the global trend. Actually, it's more starking the involvement of the public sector, which is larger than the global average in the next 10 years, as more large-scale projects will be deployed. For the last 10 years, as you see, the role of private was larger. The reason behind this is actually the size of the projects were smaller deployed in the last 10 years that we saw in our databases. When we come to the India's forecast more in detail, we see a key acceleration of hydropower growth in India. This is due to the many new policies that were introduced, reviving old projects that were not moving forward, but also new pump storage projects that are coming online. And this is dominated by, as you can see in the forecast, very large scale projects ranging from 500 megawatts to 2.5 gigawatts, leading the forecast. And we see an acceleration not only because of the policy changes, but also the need for further flexibility, leading to an important deployment of pump storage plants in our forecast, which accounts 1/3 of the forecast alone, which is very, very important in terms of a trend. So India is moving from a slowdown of the capacity growth over the last decade, over the last 5 years, to a significant acceleration of the growth, driven by multiple policies such as purchase obligation, financial support, state policies, and cross-border trade remains an important driver, while regulations reducing the time to find the land and the permitting is very, very important. I'd like to finish my slide with an important point where we are globally compared to the net zero. But before that, we did an accelerated case in our forecast, taking into account all the challenges that hydropower has, including those that I mentioned: social acceptance, limited policy support, and so on and so forth. And we see an important upside of hydropower, 40%, and India's contribution here is rather significant in Asia and Pacific. We see that if countries are streamline permitting, increase affordable financing, and provide better visibility on revenues, especially from pump storage projects, and improve the market design, we could reach globally an important upside of hydropower. But this is not enough. If you want to be in line with the net zero targets, we need to see a doubling compared to the accelerated case of growth in the next decade. This requires not only addressing the financing or policy or regulatory challenges, this requires a raising ambition. and this holds true also for targets in India. Raising ambition remains key in addition to the policy support and addressing regulatory and financing challenges. As my director mentioned, we did 7 policy considerations for the governments. We will discuss them throughout this webinar, but the most important one being that move hydropower up the energy and climate policy agenda, which we see that India has been doing prominently over the last few years. And we will discuss this in our first panel session, but also important to enforce sustainability standards so that hydropower meets those standards globally. It's also part of the first session, and recognize the critical role of electricity, that hydropower for electricity security, and reflects its value through remuneration mechanisms. This is part of session 1 and session 2 related to flexibility. The flexibility capabilities of existing hydropower plants. This is not a topic for India currently, as most of its fleet is young, but it will come very soon. Support the expansion of pump storage hydropower, a topic for the second session, and affordable financing is the topic of the first session. And we will go through the discussion session. I would like to invite all the panelists to join and turn on their cameras, and then I will moderate the session in the coming 30 minutes. Thank you very much. Please turn on your cameras for the first session. Perfect. I'm going to start. We have another panelist who will join a bit later, I think. And I would like to start with Mr. Batra. He has an experience working in the Central Electricity Authority for 18 years, if I'm not wrong, and who held
33 years.
How many?
33 years. 33
years, sorry. 33 years, and lastly held a very key position. Now he is basically the project director in the Integrated Research and Action for Development. I would like to ask you, how do you see the change in policy environment in India for hydropower when you were there last, if I remember correctly, in 2018 and 2019, all the policies were introduced, and in 2020 and 21. Could you please give us what were the policy drivers at the time, and how do you see the new policies driving this acceleration of hydropower? What is your initial drivers assessment?
All right, so policies don't normally happen in a jiffy. There's discussions which take place over years, and I'm aware because discussions on incentivizing hydro were taking place in terms of the other advantages of hydropower plant, like flood control and building of infrastructure, and even fishing and tourism for hydropower plants. These were going on, and ultimately this has culminated in notifications coming out with respect to at least 2 or 3 of them of flood control and building of infrastructure, where a certain amount of capital cost would be funded by the other departments of the government, so as to bring down the cost of hydropower plants. Also, the other thing, of course, the other thing about the discussion about the diminishing percentage of hydro was a point of discussion, because it came down from more than 30% or 35% to 15% and less than 15% over a period of a few decades. And this was bothering the government, because hydro, as was mentioned, is a flexible resource and non-polluting. So on how to encourage these discussions were going on, as also to see how to reduce the cost of not only the capital costs, but also whether we should it should be only cost plus tariff, or we should go for competitive bidding. The Brazil model was examined in terms of competitive bidding, how Brazil mitigated the risks with respect to hydrological surprises. A group of hydro plants. So in some years, maybe one hydro plant would have higher inflows and other lower inflows. So there's a mechanism for balancing, a pooling of risks. So all these were studied, and this has culminated in a number of policy decisions, which was mentioned by Mr. Rahate, and also treating it as a renewable source of energy. Earlier, it was only up to 25 megawatts hydro, which was renewable, but now it is even large hydro is considered as renewable. So some of the benefits of renewable, which includes also the hydro purchase obligation for people to purchase power from hydro, there were, of course, conflicting things earlier also, which were discussed about the cost of hydro, because the cost of hydro kept on going up because of the resettlement and rehabilitation issues of various people who were displaced, as well as the cost of land, which almost doubled over some years, because people were wanting higher compensation. So these were how to mitigate all these adverse things which resulted in people not going for hydro and increasing the cost and therefore the tariff. Earlier also it was discussed that these should have long-term loans, whereas most of these loans were for 12 years, and therefore the initial tariff used to be high and suddenly drop after 12 years. On how to backload this tariff, there was discussion of long-term loans of 18 to 20 years or even 25 years, where the government gave a directive for the government financial institutions to fund long-term loans for hydro, so as to reduce, because the levelized tariffs may be comparable to coal, but the initial tariff being high, there were people were not willing to take hydro. So these were some of the discussions which were taking place and which have resulted in new notifications coming out by the government of India. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll come back to you with the challenges. I would like to turn to Mr. Chaubey, the Director of Technical in NHPC, actual developer who develops projects on the ground. And I would like to get his opinion on the impact of these new policies and changes on the hydropower development, and what are the key main challenges that you see in accelerating the growth of hydropower in India. The floor is yours, Mr. Chaubey.
Good afternoon. There are many challenges which we are facing. We can categorize it in three parts. One general type of challenges, one educational challenges, and another is the operational challenges. So in general challenges means large number of clearances we require to start hydropower projects. And this involves multiple authorities where we have to get these clearances. And there is non-existence of a single window system, single window clearances, that creates a bit problem. The second is that non-availability of longer duration finance at a competitive rates. And then there is a shortage of skilled manpower, specialized technology, and long gestation period associated with the hydropower projects. These are the general type of challenges which we face and which is basically slowing down the development of hydropower. If you come to the institutional challenges, so land acquisition, law and orders problems, security problem, geological, topographical and hydrological factors, project management, and efficient handling of contractual issues. These are some of the challenges which we face in the development of the hydropower projects. If you come to the operational challenges, then there are certain legislations like water cess, environmental flow, I&R issues, I&R policies, and then change in the climate changes, that is the changes in hydrology, natural calamities, and commercial risks like timely revenue realization from the discoms to whom we sell the power. So all these things are also challenges in developing the hydropower.
Thank you very much, sir. We will come back to those challenges very soon. I'd like to turn to the Mr. Dogra from the World Bank. You are on the financing side of the project. You assess the policies, the regulatory aspects, and the project aspects, and then decide whether to finance on how to finance a project. And according to a financer's perspective, what are the risks in India? I mean, globally, we know what are the risks, more or less. I'm sure India shares many of those. But what are the risks that you see in terms of the development of hydropower in India to achieving these ambitious targets mentioned by Mr. Rahate? And you can also give us actually a perspective, because World Bank is financing solar projects, wind projects, bioenergy projects, and electricity, other storage projects around India. So it will be great to have a perspective on the differences between those. How do you see the risk assessment of those in different technologies? Thank you very much.
Thanks. I think a very pertinent question, and our colleagues who are here in this discussion have already mentioned, the challenges which hydropower is facing. Probably all those challenges become the risk for any investor which is coming from the investment point of view. And as Mr. Batra and Director Project from NHPC was explaining, we also classify those risks with respect to 4 or 5 financial risk in one sense. That would be, one is on the technical side of it, which is clearly on the time, cost, geological surprises, procurement management, and financial closure and related delays. Now, when it comes from bank perspective, bank generally tries to focus on the reasons behind these issues, right? Whether it's technical, or I'll also say, I'll first introduce that there are 4 such types which I'm thinking. One is technical. Second is additional externalities in the form of environment and social risks. And then you have also geopolitical, where it's transboundary rivers or other aspects. And last would be political economy, which is very, very important in case of India as well, as you rightly mentioned. There are certain rivers which are taken to be pious. Rivers have their own identity. Rivers have their own natural biodiversity habitats. So keeping all those factors together and keeping all the technical reasons of the delay and related surprises, bank tries to look at it from the perspective of securing our financing. And as you know that World Bank also gives a lot of importance on environment and social aspects. And over the last few years, the approach from World Bank also has changed to this direction on the hydro. So we upfront look at environment impact assessments, whether it's cumulative or strategic in one point. We also look at it from a bankable DPR perspective, because what we have seen in India is, generally the central electricity authorities and the related project developers work very closely on this chapter-wise clearances of each and every technical aspect, and India has a strong technical capability in reviewing those. But we still feel that, when it comes to bankable or the DPR, which has detailed analysis, it still gives a lot of challenges when it comes to the implementation, and also it gives a direct relation to the contract, because when a contractor comes into picture, then he or she, whosoever is applying for this or bidding for this particular contract, should have that detailed understanding of the project, which is I can say is missing in this case. And that's why bank identifies this, that the mapping of geological surprises, identifying the various contract clauses are equally important to de-risk, these projects from the other aspects. So there we look for good skilled contractors. We also look for a list of contractors. We also of the opinion that they needs to be brought in upfront into the DPR preparation itself, so that they understand. And also a few of the studies very clearly give you an idea that at least 0.25% of bid cost goes into preparation of the bid. Now, so that also it's important that the contractor which is participating in the bid should also have very clear understanding on the possible risks which are coming in the hydro, and we try to strengthen those aspects so that whenever someone is bidding, at least those clarities are there. You also asked about our comparison with respect to solar and hydro. Bank is working in India on both the aspect. Solar also, we have great relationship with Government of India, and REVA is one of the important project which is being mentioned now. But when it comes to combination, I think VRE is one of the important aspect which bank is now looking at it. We are also looking at the flexibility of hydro. Hydro should not be compared as unit to unit analysis, but hydropower should be seen as a resource which can be bundled and which has capability of dispatch flexibilities, load following capabilities, and smoothly integrating it with the VRE into power system probably will also give that value to hydro on the alternative for balancing power. So I think on overall from balancing perspective and from the risk finance, we are equally treating the renewable energy sources and also experimenting with bringing flexibility, whether it's from the hydro or from ancillary services. That kind of models we are bringing in. We are working now in Himachal to look at for those bundling of power and those models. And also within energy systems, we are working with Government of India and Ministry of Power in particularly on BESS and PSP and other storage projects, so that a better and bankable DPRs and identification of upfront risks can be duly taken care. I'll stop here for some time.
Thank you very much. I'll come back to you on the calculation of the flexibility and value. Mr. Batra, I would like to turn to you and ask a question on permitting, because the permitting of hydropower and environmental assessment of hydropower is by far the largest challenge all around the world, and it basically creates an important barrier to growth of hydropower projects. And India as well, this was identified an important challenge. What is your thought about the permitting process and how this can be maybe streamlined to accelerate the growth?
Yes, environment is gaining a lot of priority around the world, and therefore a lot of people are looking into various aspects of that, of environment, and therefore, yes, it does get delayed. In some cases, takes quite a lot of time. So my sense is that there should be a single window clearance for that, because they sometimes have to go to different departments. And there should be good coordination between the two. True, all aspects have to be seen. That's right, but maybe they can work simultaneously. To a single window agency delegates the work to maybe 2-3 agencies in terms of everything. The impact of the if there's going to cause earthquakes or the forests, or if it's going to be inundated, or all the aspects of that can be looked at simultaneously. I think there should be a single window clearance for environment, and the government should form that single window, because ultimately they're all government departments which should do that. I agree to that. Yes.
Thank you very much. I'll turn quickly to Mr. Dobra. If this single entity is established, do you think risks will be reduced, or what is your perspective on this?
I think I have a slightly a balanced, sort of neutral view on this. Reason being, single window clearances requires intersectoral coordinations, and you need to have a good platform of establishing that intersectoral team of professionals. So if we are really vouching for a single window clearance, I think we also have to look at it from the different skills perspective, whether you need to have you have good skills on the technical side, no doubt about it. But when it comes to the other skills like environment, social, safety, climate risk, basically that part we generally put it at the onus of contractor, and then that there is compromise on those aspects also. So it's important that when we are going for single window clearances, good to have an intersectoral team where all these skills are available, and then analyze. And I think I like the idea with Mr. Batra is pointing out, but that needs to be backed with a good set of skills which are required for the critical evaluation of hydro. For example, geological skills. And the geological baseline mapping is very, very important in case of hydro, which can be upfront given to the contractors, and then probably bid could also improve in that sense.
Yeah,
I'll stop here.
I agree. Mr. Chaubey, in terms of the permitting, and you also developed projects outside of India for cross-border purposes, and it remains an important driver in actually Southeast Asia and the Asian region. How do you see the differences between these cross-border projects versus the projects that you are developing in India from a permitting perspective? And then I'm going to ask you the contracting perspective, because in the overall electricity sector, we did a lot of work with distributed solar PV, and obviously the DISCOMs and the financial health of DISCOMs are a challenge in India in terms of contracting. We see also a lot with wind and solar PV projects, contracts are renegotiated, asking for lower tariffs. If you could comment on this kind of an importance of the solid contract for the development of large-scale hydropower projects. The floor is yours.
When we have to take up the cross-border projects, then we have to see the financial viability, that is the most important. And then the income tax applicability, what is there in that country, custom duty applicables on export and imports, international standards of project design and equipment, labor laws of that country, and the environmental protection laws existing in that country, and foreign exchange rate variation risk, so, and the language barrier, of course, sometimes. So all these things are impediment, or these are the factors which we consider when we go for the cross-border this thing. As far as this tariff with DISCOM, because we know that financial health of the DISCOMs are not very good, and that creates a problem. So there we have to say that sometimes we say that free power, like free power, that has to be staggered, or some SGST waiver should not be there. So all those things, some innovative financial solutions, if we get to encourage the expedite, encourage, so that our tariff comes in a reasonable figure. So those things are there. We do take into account while working out the tariff, so that DISCOMs come forward. Otherwise, normally now they are started hesitating in going for long-term PPA and all that.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Dogra, quick question to you. Off-takers risk. In very shortly, how do you consider in your financing of the projects of hydropower? Because it's not only for hydropower, it's for the whole entire sector. Do you see this as an important challenge, or as a medium challenge, or as a low challenge compared to all the challenges you mentioned?
On long-term PPA, also there's long debate now these days in India. Some of the states are doing away with PPAs, and now some of the states are going back to the PPAs. So, but I consider this as one of the important issue as far as the improvement in the sector is concerned, which is why I always I was quoting in my earlier answer to the question as well. You know, the gestation period of the project is so long. You know, for the past few years, what we have seen is Rampur around 10 years, you know, starting from understanding of MOU to signing or the operational. Similarly, Malana probably has gone to 11 years, Koldam around 15 years. So those are, so if we have to really improve those, I think it's very important to look at those risks, and especially on the off-taker side. I'll stop here.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Batra. The question related to the planning of the hydropower projects, and in terms of the how these are assessed, but also not on the solar, not on the resource perspective, but also we mentioned the value of hydropower. So is it, what kind of value we should give to hydropower? Is it provides an important important values in multiple ways. How do you see whether India is evaluating hydropower in terms of its storage value, flexibility value, multi-purpose value, water management value? Are those values currently being given to hydropower? Because it's a global challenge. We looked at it very carefully, and most cases, none are given. So how is the situation in India in terms of the benefits of hydropower and price those?
Right. So for you talked about water management, that of course, about flood control and irrigation and others, that steps have been taken and a policy has been issued in terms of the benefits of hydropower, the side benefits of hydropower. As far as the other ones about the value of hydro, because these are essentially during the non-monsoon season peaking plants, and you peak the value of power during peak is always more than that during off peak. If you see the difference in the power exchange prices and in terms of basically demand and supply situation, the demand is always higher during the peak time. Now, this, as far back as in 1998, the hydro policy said that the differential pricing between peak and off peak has to be there. I should be there, but a policy is not a law, so it gives a direction. That hasn't yet happened, but I can see the reason why, because see, if you have to pay the hydro people, hydro generators more during the peak time, they also have to collect higher tariff from the consumers during that time. Because it's a back-to-back thing, it's not that you collect the same tariff and pay higher during peak time. Now, therefore, the policy also says that the consumers also have to have a differential tariff. Now, that is there only in the case of industries presently in India, which is time of day, which is also not very flexible because they're fixed times. Now, with more and more of intermittent renewables coming, and maybe the solar generation coming up during the day, and so maybe the times of these peaks or the differential between demand and supply will change, maybe over seasons and as well as over the years also it may change. So that flexibility of pricing differently for peak and off-peak power has to be there, and that is practically possible only when you have smart meters, because in smart meters you can program, because otherwise how will you measure it? How will you measure that at different times you have peak and off peaks over seasons, over years? Even over season between day and time, as days become shorter during winter, your peak times would change even over during the day. So these are things which are happening, and I'm sure it will happen. It's just a question of time. The smart meters are being installed. It's already there in the tariff policy, and there's the government is very much trying to get the states. The difference is it's a federal system, so you have the states and the center have their own powers, and therefore it cannot be forced. But when a policy is there, the states generally follow that policy which is set by the central government, because they know that it's going to be beneficial for the states also. So I think that more and more smart meters get installed, not only for industry but for commercial as well as residential consumers, when this permeates to that level, you will have that facility of being able to charge differently between times of day, depending on peak and off peak, and even actually time of use. You may have fluctuations of wind generation that could have even real-time pricing. So we are looking, I'm sure the government is looking at that. There has been a lot of discussions, but the challenge is in terms of how to get it done, how to get it implemented. So I'm sure that will happen.
This is a very important challenge globally. So in terms of how to value it, I would like to turn quickly because our time is very limited. Mr. Chaubey, do you see in terms of the valuing hydropower or pricing mechanisms changing in India, benefiting or providing more benefits to hydropower players in the next future, as Mr. Batra mentioned? This new tariffs on the peak demand, when hydropower meets the peak demand, is it an important factor that you see in the coming years, or you are only counting on the flat tariffs as usual in the PPAs?
I think since hydropower is more convenient for the meeting the peaking requirements, and that's why if peaking hours tariff is different from the base energy tariff, then perhaps any developer will get attracted to the hydropower and come. But if we see that tariff are flat, all the around the same tariff is there, whether it is a base energy or this thing, in that case, our project cost comes more, and the total energy generation comes less, and then tariff becomes high. So it becomes detrimental. So since we are servicing the grid, we are at the requirement of the grid, or for the stability and for stability of the grid, we are helping it out. So in that case, all these ancillary services that hydropower provides to the grid, a separate tariff should be there, or some factor has to be there to balance this one.
Thank you.
If it is that, then it is better, I think.
Thank you. Mr. Dogra, you mentioned in your speech that you are doing an assessment in World Bank about this value of hydropower on flexibility. And could you please also comment on it? How do you consider this very shortly in terms of the value of hydropower?
I think it's the way we were discussing just now before this. I mean, the value of hydropower as a peaking power, as we always talk about this, that this has a greater value, greater flexibility, and gives peak, but we don't give that value or that kind of tariff to hydro. And we don't, we need in this India to recognize that this is what the value hydro is bringing. We can also think of removing two-part tariff to energy-only market with intermittent but limited capacity auctions. That's also another thing which bank is also analyzing these days. And also the balancing of the cost, which is important. And in case of which I mentioned, the project, there we are trying to understand that how we can make hydro flexible, how we can make ancillary services work in favor of hydro, and also think of new or long-term offtake arrangements, as you mentioned on the PPA side as well, so as to give that credit which hydro has to take. So on those lines, we are developing a sort of case study. If it matures, we will definitely bring in our project to showcase for the Indian system as a whole that this is how it can be. That will be a pilot, but yes, that will be taken care through this project.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Batra, you raised your hand. You want to comment on the topic, and after that I will be closing this session to move to the second one.
Yes, in the direction of the value of hydropower, there's a draft regulation which has come out by the Central Electricity Regulatory Commission in line with the policy of creating an ancillary service market. So that has just come out, and hopefully when it gets finalized, we will have more value, more value for hydro plants in the future. That's one. And just to talk about long-term PPAs, which was said. See, right now, because we're having shortage, the power exchange prices are hitting 20 rupees, which is the upper ceiling, 20 rupees per unit. Whereas about a few months back, the average was around 2 rupees 50 paisa. And the average itself is coming about 14, 15 rupees. So, I mean, people will have to take a holistic view that it's when you have a shortage, the prices will go up. What we are seeing is only the short-term market. We should not take decisions based on only short-term market. We have to take a longer-term view. It's necessary for so much capital expenditure for a hydro project to be able to recover those costs. So it must have, to my view, long-term PPAs. The only thing is whether to have it cost plus or to have competitive tariffs. This is something which needs to be seen, and there are ways of seeing it. Maybe some more work needs to be done on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, thank you very much to all the discussants. This was an excellent discussion. We covered most of the drivers and challenges that hydropower developers are facing in India. We will be discussing more in detail the flexibility part in the second session. And thank you very much to all. And then I will give the floor to Mr. Rabishkek, I think, to start for the second session. Thank you all. This was excellent. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
So let us right away move into the session 2, where I will request the panelists and the presenters to switch on the video. Hemi, you will be there, of course. You are making the first presentation.
Yeah.
Dr. Amu Jacob, I request you to switch on the video for the second presentation. Mr. Sushil Suni, I request you to switch on the video. Colonel A.K. Sinha and Mr. Balram GV from ex-ED Greenco.
Should I start?
Are we there?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. So, Hemi, maybe you can start the first presentation and then we can move to Amo. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. I will be talking about the second part of the hydropower market report, which was the chapter 4 on flexibility and storage, and quickly go through the global perspective on this and leave Amu to discuss Indian perspective on this. So we all discussed this, we all mentioned this. Are we ready for this? We as a whole world don't know yet. The increasing share of variable renewables. As you can see here, in the next just 5 years, the number of countries who will be reaching 40% or over share of variable renewables in their power systems will grow basically from 2 countries to 11. Those who grow from 20% to 40% will double. And you see that the countries who are having very small shares, 0 to 5%, will decline significantly. And all of these will move to higher shares in just 5 years. A challenge that will come in our scenario analysis, we looked at India. And when you look at India today in 2019, the variation of the load between peak and off-peak load swings is basically meeting peak demand in the later afternoons and then going down and so on and so forth. But we also modeled this daily peak and off-peak load swings in 2030 in a decarbonization scenario. As you can see, the swings are significantly much larger in India, as wind and solar PV share increases drastically in our models. We see a different power system, a different dispatch curve in India in just 10 years, if India moves very fast on this journey of expanding wind and solar PV. So what does hydropower do? And what it can offer is actually very significant. If you look at hydropower's flexibility components, we looked at only 3 indicators. In terms of startup time, hydropower is basically one of the most lowest startup times, even sometimes lower than the OCGT plants who are considered as peakers. The minimum load that hydropower can run is around 35 to 45%. Slightly higher than the hard coal, but better than the gas plants. It's also average ramp rate. This is the most important part of I would like to discuss. Within minutes, hydropower plants can go from 1% to 90 to 100%, which will be extremely needed for a scenario that I showed where the swings are very large in the 15-minute marks in the coming years. So hydropower is actually the only technology in the world that can provide the services to the grid from sub-seconds to months, because it provides a long-term storage opportunity. It is also the cheapest sort of long-term storage today. I'm talking about pumped hydro here, significantly cheaper than battery storage for the storage hours above 4 hours in the camp. So it is extremely crucial for the security of the power systems. So when you look at the storage capabilities of hydropower in the world, we talk about batteries. Today, the battery storage in all the power plants plus electric vehicles is less than 1 terawatt hours provides today. When you look at the pump storage compared to this, it's almost 15 times larger than the battery. What all the electric cars, if they were used as the storage capability for the grid, plus the storage power plants, it's only a portion of what PSH plants can provide. In addition to that, we have been talking a lot about the reservoir plants. When you look at these two, PSH and battery, and compare it with the reservoir equivalent of this, which means hydropower dams, we see a big difference. We calculated for the first time 1,500 terawatt hours of an incredible amount of storage, which is stored behind the dams, which can be used flexibly. So it is important to remember also, in addition to PSH, the flexible use of hydropower reservoir plants. Coming to PSH, I would like to present the global picture here and leave the session to Amu. We see in the world an important revival of pumped hydro storage, particularly for reasons to increasing needs of system flexibility in Europe and Asia and China. You can see in the coming decade, we expect hydropower growth to more than double compared to the averages over the last 40, 50 years. This is an incredible upscale, which is mostly driven by China, but not only. As you can see, developing Asia is the second largest growth, and the majority of this growth will come from India. So it is important to also highlight the growing role of pumped hydro storage and the projects coming up. Is this enough flexibility for the coming years? Probably not, especially in those regions, especially Europe and North America, where wind and solar is growing exponentially or has grown exponentially, and the grids need more and more long-term storage, where the permitting issues and the remuneration limits does not give the right signals to developers to deploy pumped hydro storage power plants. So thank you very much for this, and I will turn into Amu. You can see the Hydropower Special Market Report free and the Data Explorer online. And I'll leave the floor to Amu now for the India presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Hemi. Can I have my presentation on the screen?
Coming up.
Sure. Thank you. So we saw that with very high penetration of renewables, grid flexibility is a major concern. And for this, we require flexible power generation as well as storages like pumped hydro storage. So in such a context, T-Step has developed a study in order to increase the uptake of pumped hydro in India. So on the pricing mechanism. Next slide, please. So we all know India is having very ambitious renewable energy target. We have a target of around 450 gigawatt. And we have very good potential of pumped hydro as well. So CEA has estimated around 96.5 gigawatt of pumped hydro in India. So if you see below the map of India, we almost all the states in the country, except for some of the northern states, we have very good pumped hydro potential. And we have 6 operational pumped hydro plants right now currently working in India. And it started in 1980s. And the first one being Nagarjuna Sagar. So a total of 3.3 gigawatt of operational pumped hydro plants are there. And they are of different types. Some are of open loop type where a flowing water body is present. And also we have even the closed loop pumped hydro system. Example is the Purulia in West Bengal. So since pumped hydro can store as well as generate electricity, it can have multifunctional role in the grid. That means it can be used as a peak load shaving asset, an energy arbitrage asset, a load following asset. It can be used for ancillary services, and it can be used for renewable energy smoothing, seasonal storage, etc. Next slide, please. So coming to the motivation of the study, even though pump storage is a most cost-effective option, when compared to all the long-term storage, the pace of development of pumped hydro in India has been very slow. And this is mainly due to the high initial investment, the environmental clearance issues, and also the low recovery from the current pricing mechanism. So our current pricing mechanism is a 2-part tariff comprising of a fixed cost and a variable cost. And the current tariff system just takes into account the amount of energy that has been generated from pumped hydro. And it doesn't take into account the grid flexibility aspect or the multifunctional role it can offer. So thus we bring into our objective of the project, which is to develop a pricing mechanism in the wake of high penetration of renewables. And we specifically focus on the variable cost part, the energy charge of it. And we develop this pricing mechanism for specific use cases like peaking operation and renewable smoothing. Next slide, please. So we developed the tariff computation method for the peak load shaving. Here, the pumped hydro will be used as a market asset. Next, where the main inputs for this method will be the short-term market prices and the market volume, as well as the load profile, which we are collecting for the different regions, as well as the details on the PHES operation. Next. And on the dispatch, there are 2 ways in which the PHES could be operated. They can charge during low prices and discharge during high prices. And other one, when it is being used specifically for a peak load shaving asset, it can be charged during low prices and discharged during peak load. Next, which comes into our pricing method. So where the pumped hydro will be trading in the market, and the peak and the off-peak prices will be based on the market clearing prices, market peak and market off-peak. And based on that, we would be able to compute the profit. Next slide, please. So next. Yeah, so here we actually developed this for one particular day for the case study of like Tehri pumped hydro in Uttarakhand. And you can see the price minute curve. So the high priced instances are used for the pumped hydro to generate electricity and get, and get that is used for selling time. And the other time when there is low priced instances, the pumped hydro will be charging or pumping. So which gives to my profit of, thus there is a difference between a peak tariff and an off-peak tariff, which comes to my generation price and my pumping price. So for this particular case study, when we analyzed, we found that the average peak tariff or my generation price will be around 3.94 and my off-peak price to be 2.15. Next. And for the peaking operation, so similar pumping duration, that is, it will be pumping during off-peak priced instances, and it will be generating during peak load of the period. And there we'll have a slight reduction in my prices. So from 3 point, the average peak tariff of the generation price will be around 3.32, and my pumping price is same as 2.15. So we actually extended this study for the entire year. Next slide, please. Yeah. So we actually did it for the entire year, and we found out some of the days, these it is not very suitable to trade in the market. So we actually found out for those days which it should not work in the market, and we actually did this study for the entire like 2 different years, one for 2019 and one for 2020, and then we could find out the profit that could be earned for those respective years, and we found that we can do a fixed cost recovery of around 16% in the with respect to the market prices of 2019, and 7% fixed cost recovery with respect to 2020 market prices. So this was the tariff computation method for the peak shaving asset, and this particular method could be even used for energy arbitrage as well as when the pumped hydro is used as a load following asset. Next slide, please. Next. So now the next method that we used is the tariff computation for RE smoothing. And here the pumped hydro will be used as a co-located plant or also as a grid connected plant. And that means it's a grid connected, it will be going for long-term market arrangements. So the inputs for our tariff computation method is load, the renewable energy generation profile, specifically the solar and wind, and also some inputs related to incentives and the market. Next. So the dispatch strategy here would be, we would charge using the peak RE production and discharge during low RE instances and when there is high load. So next, and the pricing mechanism would be calculated such a way that the pumped hydro will be able to meet the renewable RPO obligations, and it will be able to reduce the RE curtailment and as well as provide dispatchable power to the discoms. Next. So again, we illustrate this particular tariff computation method using a case study of Pinnapuram in Andhra Pradesh. So this is a co-located pumped hydro plant, and this is integrated with a renewable energy plants of 2000 megawatt of solar and 400 megawatt of wind, and the pumped hydro is around 1000 megawatt connected, and it has an efficiency of around 76%. Next slide, please. So next. And the dispatch strategy, as I said earlier, we will be dispatching or we will be generating during low RE instances and when there is high load, and we will be charging, that is pumping, during high RE periods. So with respect to that, when we actually do it for Pinnapuram project, our pricing mechanism is going to be in this way, that is, it will be RE cost plus interconnection charges, and that would be my pumping price, and my generation price will be my pumping price with certain incentives, which I termed here as in the second table as X. So this X or the incentives is basically the RE curtailment penalty, the compensation for RE curtailment penalty which has been given to RE plants could also be even given to pumped hydro as they are reducing RE curtailment. And there is some avoided cost of high priced purchase of thermal or gas. So that could be given as certain incentives. Also a grid flexibility, since it is providing the renewable energy support and it's providing grid flexibility. Certain incentives in the form of grid flexibility can be provided, as well as a generation-based incentive, which was even provided to RE plants in its initial use. So those are some of the incentives that could be provided to my pricing to the pumped hydro system. Next slide, please. So we did this case study for the same Pinnapuram project with different scenarios with different prices. So we found out that the pumping cost, we actually the RE cost and the interconnection, the transmission interconnection charges were also added, which we just took it as one, and it lies in the range of 3 to 4 rupees per unit. And my compensation, if I add to these like different scenarios of compensation, if I add it to my pumping cost, my generation will be in the range of 3.37 to 8.41. So which gives me a profit basically in the range of 0.37 to 4.41. So depending upon that, the pumped hydro developer can actually pitch in, okay, this could be the pumping and my generation cost, and so as they can earn certain profit, and that particular profit earned could be used for their fixed cost recovery. So these are the two tariff computation method that we have used. Next slide, please. So coming to a major recommendation, so we recommended differential pricing mechanisms with different pumping and generation prices instead of having only generation-based charges. And the profit earned by this particular pricing mechanism can be used for fixed cost recovery. And the pricing mechanism has to be developed for specific use cases. So we have shown for two main use cases, that is the peak load shaving and the renewable smoothing, but it is extendable to the other use case of energy arbitrage as well as load following in case of peak load, and that is where PHAs is operated in the market. And specific case study was done for Tehri pumped hydro, where we saw for a fixed cost recovery of around 16 and 7% depending upon the market clearing prices. And for round-the-clock support or RE smoothing use cases, where PHAs is used as a grid asset, we need to provide certain incentives like compensation for providing RE curtailment, then the avoided cost from high price purchase of thermal or gas plants, grid flexibility incentives, generation-based incentives. And as specifically for the Pinnapuram pumped hydro plant, we saw that the profit can be in the range of 0.37 to 4.41 rupees per unit. So this were our recommendation based on our pricing mechanism. And we also know this is with respect to the variable cost. Next slide, please. So we have also certain recommendation with respect to the funding mechanism, because it is a high initial, there's a high initial investment for pumped hydro, like an expense distribution model with multiple stakeholders. Okay, so that there will be a reduction in the risk, and then utilizing sites which are already cleared of environmental clearances like open pit coal mines and beneficiary owned lands could be reducing fixed cost. Budgetary subsidy on viability gap funding could be also provided on the capital, and also channelize foreign direct investment for most of the pumped hydro project. And then on the environmental concerns as well as the high commissioning cost, we could also go for, we recommend smaller distributed pumped hydro plants, because it might have flexible operation as well as it will mitigate delays and cost overruns, also legal hurdles and protests due to environmental clearances. So these are some of our recommendations. So that's it from the pricing mechanism study of C-STEP. Next slide, please. Thank you. That's it from my.
So thank you, Amu. Thank you, Hemi, also for making the presentation. I think both the international perspective and the Indian perspective in the pumped hydro were explained. Now I'll as we are discussing hydro's potential for system integration, flexibility, and storage in this session, I'll turn to Mr. Soni first. We have three panelists here: Mr. Soni, as I said, Colonel A.K. Sinha, and Mr. Balram. So I'll turn to Mr. Soni first, who has worked for a long time with POSOCO and now serves as an advisor to POSOCO. Sir, as a great operator and we like to gain from your experience, from a long experience, what role have you seen hydropower playing in terms of system flexibility in India? And do we really use it fully to the fullest potential? I think, yeah, so I'll like your response on this.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity. Let me straight come to your question and try to answer it. Number one, over the period, hydro utilization has tremendously improved in India. Reasons are many. Number one, that we have now got all India grid. Number two, that there is a market and enough signals are coming. So what was earlier almost a flat generation has started doing peaking. I have just given a link on the chat. Anyone who wants to get into detail can get into that. We have started getting more 4 to 5 gigawatt extra peaking out of the same installed capacity of hydro. Now, what is the main reason why we were not getting? And then the subsequent recommendations. Number one is that paisa per unit was the real issue. If you have only energy charge rate, then the plant has no incentive to flex. Plant has no incentive to generate more during peak hours. The water has to simply go through turbine and he gets the money. So the tariff, the overall tariff, front loaded, back loaded, levelized is a separate issue. How do we pay to the plant? And in central sector, at least the Central Electricity Regulatory Commission brought in what is called hybrid tariff. We pay for the mechanical availability of the machine and other parties of energy. That is only a hypothetical, though it's a zero marginal cost, but still only hypothetical. So all the central sector plants are doing excellent peaking, because if they don't do peaking, they won't get their fixed charges. So that's the one of the major point which I thought I would add. The second is as far as the importance of this is concerned, the earlier session had a very nicely covered minimum, fast ramping, and quick start, quick stop. So many things are there. But then we need to value each of them, which was also discussed in the earlier one. But the moment we say that we will give you more if you deliver more during peak, not necessarily as a separate tariff of peak, but the fixed charge, then plant starts behaving like that. And we have seen changes in the state plants. It has not happened. That must happen. That's another thing. So the issue as far as the pump storage is concerned, the main issue is how do we take care of the fixed charges? Rest all is small things. Ancillary and everything is 1%, 2%. That will not make a dent. That's my very conviction. So what we need to do is the way we do for transmission charge. Transmission charge, we don't pay paisa per unit. The pump storage fixed charge has to go as a part of the grid. Only then the loss in the pumping, that can be taken care of by the tariff and the scheduling and all that. We need pump storage. We need water batteries. There is no doubt about it. 9 p.m. 9-minute event has proved beyond doubt. The world has seen what Indian Hydro can do, but it has to be institutionalized. Now, three issues which are very difficult for us to handle is that we have a shared projects. So once it is a very shared project, then we need different kind of a system. The second is the jurisdiction changes from central commission to state commissions. And that's another kind of a thing. And we have a federal structure, and most of the plants fall into the judge. So for the time being, let me stop here and say that it is all doable. Central Regulatory Commission has already given in its tariff the incentive for the pump storage plant. Gradually, everybody will realize the value of pump storage and storage of hydro. All what we need to do is separate out the fixed charges and put it somewhere else, and not do the optimization with the fixed charge. Then it doesn't work out. We have seen 15-16%, but then nobody will come up. So, and then all other things like 4-quadrant operation, synchronous condenser operation, ancillary services, fast regulation ancillary services, moving to 5 minutes so that we value the ramping more better. All these things are important. We are doing it also, but they are all very niche. They cannot make or break things. They can only add on. So that's all. I would end by saying that it's a renaissance of pump storage. Pump storage came when nuclear came, that they were very rigid. So now we have a renewable. So we need to, bring back, but I'm very happy to hear Mr. Rahate about the policy changes. And now the regulators also have to move, and it should be possible for us to have good hydro and use it very wisely. Thank you.
Thank you, Suni sir. I think you left it at a point where it's very pertinent to get Colonel Sinha's opinion, because he has been managing solar, wind projects, hybrid projects, along with the storage. And this storage includes both battery and pumped hydro, to the best of my knowledge. Colonel Sinha, you as somebody on the commercial side at SECI have experience of uh, tendering and auctioning various things for various projects for setting them up. So, can you share your experience of such a project where you had both solar wind, RE, as well as storage? And what role do you see uh, uh, in terms of making the right tender, the right way of auctioning for these projects? Colonel Sinha, over to you.
Yeah, good afternoon to everybody. Hope everybody can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you. Can you be a little louder?
Yeah, yeah. Can you hear me now loud and
Yeah,
clear?
yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I think most of the discussions in the session one and subsequently have covered major part of it, but particularly when they coming to tender part, we may have various ideas and concepts, but finally it has to convert into business model which must be financially viable, and somebody establishes this, somebody does the accounting and billing, and somebody has to buy it and pay for it. So there is our role, and we come into play. And if you see the journey as it has gone in renewable energy, we started initially with the primary with the solar, where we had a CUF of around 17%, and then we gradually moved. Nowadays, say we keep it around 24%, 23%, but developers are able to give it much more than that. They have option to offer more than that. And last 2 3 years, a trend has started building. There were earlier, it could you had a plant and people were ready to buy it, but now demand and supply things are settling down, and people started particularly buying entity in discoms, and that's the major buyer. They started asking for having some kind of a stability, firmness in the power, and predictability in the power. So we have to supply them what they want. Otherwise, there's no fun of having a project if in case power cannot be sold. So we looked into bringing a hybrid, and hybrid also we went on to higher CUF, having a much more say predictability in a particularly peak hour. That's what we have mostly talking about in the morning and the evening. So if you can see, I can say that the trend has been building up in some way, or we have been trying to meet the requirement and innovate by coming up some kind of innovative tenders. So hybrid came, and then we came where the discoms, they have been asking for having a much better quality of power as well as the firmness. We came out with the first assured peak power, where we had given a particular time in the evening. You will have 4 hours, in the morning 2 hours. There has to be a CO of a minimum 35%, and we have to come out with it. As far as we are concerned, I think generally today we are talking about hydro and as storage. When we come out with the tender documents, we don't specifically define, unless it is a part of a guideline, uh, which technology a developer would employ or would like to do. We leave it to the developer, because this field is very, very dynamic. Things are moving very fast, and people are innovating in the private sector, and they have a various combination of permutation. So somebody may go for the battery, somebody may go for hydro, or may go through the combination. So we had the challenge: how do we go about it? So the first challenge was, if in case we put up some kind of preference to battery, then probably wherever the plant is there, you can have a battery integrated. It becomes a project design itself. Or if you keep it somewhere in between, then what happens to transmission charges and how things will be done? So all those issues started coming up. And if in case we go for pump hydro, and where right now, as everybody has spoken, pump hydro takes a hell of a time to create. Financial models are different. So broadly, you would like to have it what is available today, and with the vision that by the time so next few years, more will add it on. So that leads towards, as a keynote address, it was address the northeast or say higher regions would be there. So we said, okay, fine, let's do it where we define the requirement of a buying entity, where per se, because you cannot reach 35% or so by your solar or say just like a hybrid, so storage has to come. The option was left to developer, but back of the mind it was kept that there is a possibility of pump hydrogen will come, and how it will be. So the first experiment what we did, we kept it co-located. Yes, it limited the scope of having a project across India, because then it became a mandatory requirement where people had to be very close proximity. That lesson also, and I do admit that as we go ahead with the various schemes or various tender documents, we keep learning from our developer side, from our experience, from buying entity, and we improve. So subsequently, we came to RTC, where RTC, we say the location was not important, as long as you are charging through RE source, which was generated through RE, could the waiver government has already given. So that gives a flexibility. So these designs have allowed us, but battery and pump storage, that two field which have the very unique attributes, and they cannot be merged in a one particular tender if you want to be very tight. So we try and keep the time period little spread out so that it's pump storage also comes on board, but we cannot take it a very long, because the buying entity cannot wait for such a long, and the tariffs, the way it is going down, and the trend what we have seen, if you get a trend rate today and if you wait for a very long period, the signing of PSAs becomes a challenge thereafter, because timelines are very challenging, and PPAs also becomes. So these have been a challenge. So we are trying to find a balance where we expect from the people who are in the pump storage environment that somehow the market demands that you have to be very close to the parameters and attributes of battery timelines. I know it is difficult, but this is demand, and nobody is waiting. People are expecting, and because they have an alternative also. So, but the attributes of pump storage, which is totally indigenous, it is a very long time. It can give you once it's established, it has got multiple other uses. You can have fishery, you can have tourism, you can have so many other things. So that gives advantage. And Government of India has constituted a committee, which was spoken in the beginning, and the new schemes have come, where the comprehensive study is being completed. I think it has already completed and submitted recommendations. So based on recommendations, some policy directives and things will come. Probably then we may have a very customized things coming up for pump storage. Till the time we are taking a storage as one entity, anybody can play at that field. So that's broadly from my side at this point in time.
Thank you, Colonel Sinha. I think what you pointed out, one of the statements you made was trying to find a balance, I think.
Yeah.
And you sort of leave it to technologies to compete among themselves, and then somebody identifies which is the best one. I think that on that note, I think it is pertinent that we come to Mr. Balram, who has a long experience in running plants in not only hydro, but I think as a part of your previous assignment at Greenco, you are handling not only hydro, but also solar and wind. So, Mr. Balram, my first question to you is, how do you see the prospects for hybrid projects and PHS, the kind of projects which Mr. Sinha is right now developing? How do you think, from operations perspective, how do you think, what is the future for them? You're on mute, Mr. Balram. Mr. Balram, you're staying.
Yeah. Well, see, it has been very informative, my first session, and in fact, it was very heartening to note that government is also looking at expediting large hydro plants and along with pumped hydro storage. But the problem, is already, Mr. Sinha has already expressed. The difficulty is to match the timelines of setting up the pumped hydro storage with that of battery. Everybody knows that batteries can be set up very quickly as long as you have money. But unfortunately, the pumped hydro storage takes a minimum of 4 to 5 years, because you need to have an upper reservoir, lower reservoir, and a lot of civil construction. You cannot just do a magic and then make it ready. And the challenge of signing the PSA, as Mr. Sinha rightly said, Today you finalize some price, and by the time you start producing electricity, the charges might have come down, as in the case of solar we have seen. Solar started off with 8, 9 rupees, 10 rupees, but today it is 2 rupees. But pumped hydro storage, now I feel if it is taken as a storage service, would be a better option than bundling with solar and wind, and then co-locating would be another challenge. Co-locating, and that challenge is mitigated now, saying that the project need not be co-located with that of wind and solar. And the very difficulty in getting the land to set up solar and wind is a huge problem. If it has to be co-located. And now the other challenge is, trying to match the price, of whatever is looked at. See, since this project involves large investment in terms of civil infrastructure. See, if it is a flat tariff, levelized tariff, then it's a challenge. And the battery, as of now, the people are thinking that the battery prices would come down in next 4 to 5 years, and why not we wait for that? There are very few takers with the high cost that it now they recently concluded bid of round the clock 300 megawatts of renew. They're still not signed. So it is because the tariff is 6 rupees 50 paisa. So nobody wants to tie up with this kind of tariff, thinking that the people have seen, the discoms have seen the reduction in solar and wind tariffs from almost 10, 12, 13 rupees. The solar being 13 rupees about 6, 7 years back is seeing a tariff of 2 rupees. So they're also thinking, why not we wait for some more time? Because as you know, the discoms don't have the paying capacity. As of now, the very few discoms who are healthy, financially healthy, and it's a very difficult situation. Now, coming to pumped hydro storage, it definitely requires 4 to 5 years of time to set up, and definitely we can't match the timelines of. That's the reason why I think the SECI has been very intelligent in saying that we don't know what is the source, but we need round-the-clock power. That actually suits the DISCOM's requirement, but trying to encourage pumped hydro storage, if you cannot distinguish the storage facility or the storage source, I don't think pumped hydro storage can match the timelines. So this is the challenge. I know how the SECI should come out with some of the modification in the tendering process to encourage pumped hydro storage. And there are the pumped hydro storage, again, it has a lot of other challenges like procurement of land. And if it is a private developer, he has even more bigger challenges. I've worked both in government sector and in private sector. I've been in power sector for almost 35 years now, 30 years in government sector. And now in the last 3 to 4 years after I took my voluntary retirement, I'm in the other side. So I know the challenges. It's very, very difficult. We keep saying that we create a single window agency. Once you open that window, you have many more doors to see. So, and that is a very big challenge. And it's very, very difficult to have single window clearances from government. And the lot of other challenges, like if this pumped hydro storage is coupled with some irrigation project, the getting clearance itself will take a longer time. Right now, I think one of the big projects which Greenco was attempting to do in Karnataka, they have not even got the stage 1 clearance of forest. So it's very, very difficult. The challenges are very, very many, and somehow we have to find solutions for this. And if this pumped hydro storage is looked at it as only a storage solution for some time, I think it may be better. The utility should take it as a storage service. If they have surplus capacities already signed up for solar, I'm sure some of the states have gone ahead and then put a lot of solar and wind capacity, like Karnataka. They have surplus power during the day, and if that can be utilized for operating this pumped storage unit, that would be a better model. The state must come out with instead of waiting for SECI to conclude this tenders. The individual states also can plan this kind of procurement of storage services from the available capacities within that state. I think with this, I think I have explained.
Thank you, Mr. Balram. I think Colonel Sinha has something to say. Maybe, sir, you proceed before I ask my last question.
Yeah, I would just like to add to what Mr. Balram had just added and few more things here. First thing, I would definitely like to inform the August gathering here. We are, as you suggested, we are coming out to 1,000 megawatt hour storage, absolutely standalone. Nothing to do with charging, who is charging and something. So NIT was there for 2,000 megawatt hour, and we are coming out very soon. It will happen. We are in the final stages of finalizing the documentation. So you will have that. The user can charge it or take it out from here, and then all the rules will apply. So that gives a opportunity. Yeah, as far as pump storage is concerned, definitely we should incentivize. But once we are in the open market, I have to meet the requirement of the buying entity. That you would agree with me. So I have to play around with the buying entity requirement. If in case a buyer, say state entity or somebody who is ready to buy and commit for PSP, I have no hassles. We can immediately come out with a PSP storage system, supported any kind of a tender. That's perfectly all right. But without buying into the assurance or somebody who is there standing and saying, yes, okay, I'll take it. It's a risky business. So I can't define a particular storage. That's a part we just wanted to add.
Thank you, Colonel Sinha, for your response to that. I have one question. Let me sort of frame it this way, and this question is to all the same question to Mr. Suni, to Mr. Sinha, and to Mr. Balram. This will probably be the last question we'll have in this session. Because we are talking about hydro, and because we are talking about system integration and I mean integration of various kind of sources and all. So how do you see the role of hydropower in bringing together these various VREs, as I may say, solar, wind, battery? I mean, these are the prominent ones, and there could be others which are today not prominent, but maybe prominent tomorrow. So, Mr. Suni, from a great perspective, Mr. Sinha, although you have been sort of a technology neutral, but I'll still seek your expert opinion on this, and Mr. Balram from an operational perspective. So, Mr. Suni, over to you first.
Yeah. So now why do we need? We need flexibility. That's the thing which is well settled, because intermittency of renewable has to be handled. If I could get flexibility from anything, it's okay for me. In the absence of hydro, in the absence of good flexible generation, we are pressurizing thermal to act as a flexible resource. We are pulsating them to 55%. Very soon we will be asking them to do two shifting operation. And that is not good for the system, and that's not economical. So one has to look at it from that angle. That's one part. The second part is batteries. It's good. This technology, the prices are falling, it's all understood. But the kind of numbers which we are talking about few gigawatts and tens of hundreds of gigawatts. Batteries, I don't think we will ever reach that scale. And so battery should come from the bottom. Battery should come from the bottom. First you start from mobile, and then your laptop, and then at the distribution level. Please do that. And pump storage should come from the top. They are the one which will give you for the grid level. So that's how I would look at it. Otherwise, we are trying to make load also flexible. Demand response we will get. We will get thermal storage. So all those technologies are there. But when it comes to size, when it comes to proven technology, and fortunately India has the resources of river pump storage. We have seen how many are there. We saw the map also again here. If these all things are there, and then you have Atmanirbhar, we have the technology, we have the manpower, then why will not do this? Now, everything coming through competitive bidding and depending on the customer's requirement doesn't work. For example, I always come back to transmission. If you would have done the same thing with the transmission, that let the people say that they will pay, then only we will build transmission, India would have never had such a nice grid. Today, we are proud of having such a nice grid that we are able to integrate renewable. Pump storage also as a policy has to come from the top, that we need, let's say, 10 gigawatts of pump storage. CA should do that evaluation study, and then whoever is the SECI or others should go for competitive bidding, get the best sites and get the most competitive rates. And then the regulator should do multi-part tariff for that, and separate out some charges which will be socialized through the network. Then things are workable. And this is a matter of a couple of years or a decade. And then we will, today, everybody loves Bhakra, but how to build something like Bhakra again? That's how one should think of. Some bold decisions have to be taken. Pump storage through normal storage mechanism and bidding, I have my own doubt whether we can reach those kind of scale. The way we are thinking in terms of renewable, a matching thing has to come from the pump storage. Thank you.
Thank you, Suni sir. Colonel Sinha, I'll come to you, but I will add on a small thing to this question of whether what is the role of hydro you see in integrating various technologies. And I will take a cue from from what Mr. Suni said. If you think about the scale and what we are aiming for, say 450 gigawatts by 2030. So in that perspective, what your response would be?
Thank you. And I must say thank you to Sanjay, because he brought very eminent points also here. But I would prefer to see, if in case we'll see in the larger, is my personal capacity, I'm saying, so individually. I'll not limit it to only 2030. We are right now, the very COP agreement which happened to, save the climate of the earth. We all are part of, a planet. We are trying to bring changes which should be more sustainable and which is going to help us and our future generation. So why not to look at a 50 years hence, maybe more. So we have to see in a much larger picture, and in that context, what Sunil brought very rightly, that unless a regulatory or a kind of a government final design, okay, hereafter, say like Germany and all, they have decided that they will not have no nuclear anymore. They've started breaking them down and shifting to renewable. So that's how we can have it. We can phase them. We can take it as, say, 15 years in a block, or maybe 10 years in a block, or maybe 20 years in a block. That this is what is going to be my breakdown. But coming to hydro and all, this is a natural resource. We can optimize, and this will be, once constructed, will last long for maybe 75 years, 100 years, maybe more, if in case it is maintained properly and the regular actions are taken to sustain it. So I'll go for a larger projects, smaller projects and medium-sized projects in a phased manner, long, coming out with a much bigger perspective and driven down from top. It will help. By looking at the battery also, battery is a short-term activity. You immediately get a response, immediately use it, but as you go ahead, the challenge will happen. How do you dispose of such a humongous quantum of battery? What do you do with this battery? It itself will become a problem in coming recycling and other things. One may argue that it will generate another, kind of a business opportunity, but that is not. That is trying to somehow, dispose of something which is no more usable, and it will have its own environmental concerns. So probably any model, and today we are talking about pumped storage and a battery. We don't know. There would be many more other forms which may come up in between, which may have a better opportunity. Say, I just give you an example of hydrogen. If you use the old mines or the cracks in the earth itself, and we are able to optimize, right now people are trying to explore it. So the moment it becomes much more viable, probably we may not have that much of gestation period and the cost impact also. That can also be utilized. So we don't know. Things will improve and happen. But we got to have a larger picture in a long term where we have to go back to the nature, use a natural resource in a natural form, which will be much more sustaining and good for us. That's my take.
Thank you, Colonel Sinha. I think you brought that point out very well. That I think we need to interfere minimally with the, I mean, minimum interference with the nature. Try to use things as they exist rather than process and, I mean, create a new problem. I think. So, Mr. Balram, over to you. I think
Yeah,
this is.
I think Mr. Soniji nailed it perfectly, because we have to think big. If you have to look at storage solution, only pumped hydro storage would be able to meet the kind of demand that is required to be met, because you are talking in terms of gigawatts. See, batteries right now, actually, in fact, lithium-ion technology and even flow batteries, it's a limited technology right now, and the kind of challenges it poses, for recycling or disposing would be a huge problem, as I see now today. If you are thinking in terms of setting up gigawatt-sized storage plants, so the pumped hydro storage is the solution. What I think is the order of the day or requirement of the day, and there are challenges, but government should come out with a policy where they encourage this storage, pump storage technology, and give some incentives, and also try to provide long-term PPAs or whatever, even if it is taken as a pump storage service from the utility. That makes sense. If they're not asked to generate, and if they're not paid in terms of energy, at least storage services. The energy that is available surplus during the daytime through wind and solar can be utilized to pump, and then the same asset can be utilized as the peaking assistance in the evening and morning. So for me, the entire hydro storage in the country should be used for peaking. So there are many states which are using them as baseload stations because they have surplus energy, surplus hydro energy available to them. If there is a national grid available now, one nation, one grid is a reality, and the energy can flow from one state to another state very easily. And this renewable sources which are abundant in few states should be utilized to run these pump storage plants. Again, the pump storage plants are available only, or the locations are available only in limited states. It is not available everywhere. It is geographically isolated, and you cannot have a pump storage unit wherever you want. You can't bring water, so the pump storage locations are limited. And you can set up solar and wind. Wind again it is there are only 4 states which are very high potential states, and solar can be there fairly in most parts of the country except for northeastern states. So grid shall be utilized in to transmit this energy from one state to other state, thanks to the policies where the transmission charges are waived for renewable energy plants. Similarly, the pump storage and hydro storage should be utilized in the country as a peaking and grid stabilizing resource in the days to come. That is my suggestion.
Thank you, Mr. Balram. I think that brings us to the close of the session. But before I mean, we sort of just to wrap it up. I think it is a very easy job for me, because I think all my 3 panelists agreed that on the role of pumped hydro. I think Mr. Suni said very well that we need a top-down approach here. Colonel Sinha presented 2 different time scales. I think at a shorter time scale, you would be open to having various technologies. But in the longer time scale, I won't use the word pumped hydro, but I think you were trying to say minimal interference with nature. I think if you agree to it, and I think Mr. Balram, you from operational perspective, you have first you have told us about their experience at Greenco, and I think you also agreed eventually to this role of pumped hydro. So I will now request my colleague, Dr. Paolo Franchi, who's the head of Renewable Energy Division at IEA, to enlighten us with what his takeaways are from this session. So, Mr. Franchi.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you. I would like to thank, first of all, of course, our colleagues of CSTP, but all the speakers and all the panelists for a very interesting discussion today. I'm really impressed. Now, let me grab a few points, and please apologize. I apologize in advance for not taking all the many points that were made today. I would like to say that I really heard all the right questions and the right issues. I really heard a full recognition of the value of the multiple benefits and value of hydropower, including due to its size and including the special role of pumped storage hydro. Now, I liked, for instance, the one of the speakers saying that this is a kind of renaissance of pumped storage hydro, which came with nuclear, and now it's coming back because of the renewables. I like this overall approach. Now, when it comes to the remuneration of this value, of the many things that we have heard today, this remains, of course, an open discussion. I heard with great attention the intervention of Dr. Jacob. I will definitely need more time to digest it all. At the same time, I really have to ask the question whether a pricing mechanism is enough to de-risk all the investment factors that are so many and that were listed today, including environmental social acceptance, the cost of land, very long construction cost and risk. A good pricing mechanism, I'm giving you my feedback, my first glance feedback, is definitely necessary, but I'm not sure it will be enough. And then at the very end, I heard something that really hit my interest, whether we should not look at pumped hydro in particular, given the size and given the value it brings to the whole system, as a kind of enabling infrastructure like grids that definitely requires a policy top-down intervention. Now, to me, this debate that I heard today is open. I don't think we certainly I don't have an answer. I think we don't have an answer, and this debate will continue. Whatever the solution that will prevail or some hybrid mechanism that will come out, I would like here to really praise the leadership of India. Everywhere in the world, countries recognize the need for much increased flexibility because of the deployment of PV and wind, but much fewer countries really act. India is acting with a number of options, with a number of very good ideas, of which we had a fantastic overview today. And this is really to praise the leadership of your government, of your country, of the stakeholders, of the whole discussion that I heard today. And what I would like to conclude with is that what you are doing in your country, given the huge size, given the huge potential, is relevant for the whole of Asia and ultimately for the whole world. So you could give and set the precedents and the good examples that could be valuable in other parts of the world. My very, very final word is that the IEA is very pleased to have participated in this workshop, and it will continue to be very pleased to continue to collaborate with you, with all the relevant stakeholders, with the government, and of course with CSTEP and other stakeholders in order to look at the value of hydropower and find the right ways for to translate this value into new investments and deployment of a safe, clean, and secure electricity source that is also an enabler for more solar and wind. With that, I would like to thank you all again, to thank all the listening audience to this workshop. I thank you very much. Have a very good afternoon and evening. Thank you from Paris. Thank you.